guys, I thought that maybe I did not explain things quite well enough today, so I want to go over the two exercises that I gave you, and I want to go through them completely and totally, like how I would go through them and how I would approach them. I don't expect you to approach it the same way, because like I said in class, I approach things from aperture priority, but you might want to approach it from shutter priority. But you're still in manual mode. It's just your way of thinking. So I'm going to go through this as I would do it in aperture priority mental thinking mode. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to do this matrix metering, and so I need to change my meter mode to a matrix or average or evaluative. And you can see that it's right there. It's the little square. It actually looks just like this on the button, and it looks like that. So if your camera's in that mode, it'll show up on your screen somewhere, either on your back screen or on your upper screen. First thing you want to do is find an evenly lit scene. I'm looking at this particular flower. There are no highlights, there are no shadows, not really. It's pretty well an even lighting throughout the whole thing. So I'm going to take a photograph of it in average meter mode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to decide, one, what aperture do I want? I like that flower. I don't know if I want everything else to be like in focus, but I would like the flower in focus. So I'm going to really open up my aperture to 1.8. And I'm going to take the shot. But before I take the shot, first I need to focus, but then I need to meter it. So I'm going to compose my shot, focus it, and I'm going to meter it. And this is on average metering. Right now, I'm a little overexposed. So I'm going to change my shutter speed so that my cursor on my meter goes back to the middle. Okay, I'm at 1/200. I'm going to go ahead and take the shot. And it looks maybe a little overexposed to me. So now I'm going to say, okay, well, my average meter isn't working so well. So I'm going to switch over to spot metering. If you remember, spot meter is just the little spot, the little dot in the middle of the square, or if you have the Canon, it's like, I think it's partial metering for the Canon. So now I'm going to evaluate this flower, and where is my brightest lights, and where is my darkest shadows? Well, my highest white is probably right about here, and my darkest is somewhere down here inside the rows. So I'm going to point my meter, the little square that shows up inside here, now that you've switched to spot. I'm going to point it at the highest highlight and see what number I get. Didn't change too much. I went down to 1/250th. I'm keeping my aperture exactly where I had it before. I recompose my shot. Take the picture. It's at this point, you should actually be looking at your histograms as well. And this is where you want to draw them on this sheet. You wanted to draw them, actually, and I missed that part, for the matrix meter part, so you want to make sure you draw that histogram that you got for your matrix meter part, but you also want to draw it for this part. So right now, my shutter speed for the highlight and my aperture is f2 and 1/250th of a second. Now I'm going to see if I can find my shadow. And I'm going to try and meter for the darkest part of the scene. I do have to change it now. I'm moving my shutter to 1/180th. I'm going to go ahead and write that down. 1/80th. Recompose the shot. And it's way overexposed. So real quick here, I'm going to show you what the histogram looks like and the photo looks like. So this is very overexposed, and it's pushed to the right. I'm actually clipping a little bit here. So that's kind of what your histogram should look like. So so now that I know that I was at 1/80th here in my shadows, and I was at 1/250th in my highlights, I'm going to figure out what the average of that is. So I'm going to look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So between 2 and 3 back. I'm changing the shutter speed only, not the aperture. And I'm going to go 2 back. You can bracket it and do both. I'm going to recompose the scene. It's showing me that I am underexposed, but that's okay. Don't change anything. And I'm getting a much more balanced histogram and photograph. So you can see that there. All right, so that's the first part of that particular exercise. The second part is to find a scene that is very highly contrasted with a lot of really bright lights and a lot of dark shadows. So we're going to pause this for a moment and move to the back. All right, so we've moved to the back where there's some sunlight and there's some shadow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of this hosta here and this tree because I've got a deep shadow in here, so I'm trying to give you guys a bit of a good example for this one. So my highest highlight in this scene is going to be this hosta flower right here because it's very bright white in the sunlight. Although this could be also considered a very high highlight. I've got a really deep shadow here on this branch, so I'm going to use that as my shadow area. But first again, I am going to do a matrix meter. Average meter, evaluative meter. So I'm going to set up my shot. I'm looking at this saying, okay, well, I really don't want all that background clutter. So I'm going to go to f 2.5 because I'd like it in focus from about here to about right back here, but I don't want the rest of that. So on matrix metering, it's telling me to shoot this at 1/650th. And in fact, that's just a little bit too much background noise, so I'm going to open this up a little bit more. So I'm at f1.8 at 1/1000th of a second. It's not bad, but it is fairly a little bit underexposed. You can see the histogram is pushed to the left. So you're going to write that down. You're going to write down what you got for your balanced meter, and then you're going to draw your histogram on the sheet. This is for the high contrast part of this exercise. I'm going to switch back over to spot metering. All right, so I want to keep the framing the same as that I just did, but this time I'm going to take my spot meter, I'm going to aim at that flower. I get a good idea. Okay, it's telling me to go to 1/2000, and I'm going to reframe it the way that I had it before, keeping the aperture the same. Okay, it's incredibly dark, and the histogram is pushed way over. Now I'm going to take it and try and find the darkest, what I think is the darkest area, tonality. I'm going to go with that shadow up there. Okay, so I just moved my shutter 8 clicks. I'm going to take the shot again. This is so you can draw the histograms for each of these different things. Okay, it's not bad actually. Even metering for the highlight actually gave me a little bit more balance, but it did clip some over here because I've got this really strong white line, so something is clipped in that image. So I moved it 8. Now I'm going to move it back 4. So I'm at 1/400th where I was at 1/1000th before. So I need to go back towards 1/1000. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Or no, I was further than that because I moved it 8. So now I'm at 1/1000. I think I was up at like I was at 1 to 2500. Now I'm at 1/1000. It shows in my meter as I'm doing this is that I'm way, way underexposed. And it does kind of show it as underexposed here a bit. But the image actually is pretty good. You have a balance of whites and you have a balance of darks. And it's actually pretty good. These are things that you can actually fix in post. Like I said, you can change things in post. You can always recover your shadows, but you cannot recover your highlights. I'm going to pause for a second and get ready to do the aperture and shutter speed exercise. Okay, aperture and shutter speed. So we start with aperture. And like I said, I think in aperture priority mode in my head, so I actually feel pretty confident with this part of it. When I get to shutter, I probably won't be as confident. I'm just warning you. So I had asked you to get to something close. I'm going to pick the same hosta that I used before, and I'm going to get up close with it. So I'm starting out at f16 on here. When I look through here, my meter's going to be completely wrong because of where I was before. But let's see where we're at. Up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to balance this out by changing my shutter speed. And I am at 1/4 of a second. This is not a good thing to be doing handheld. I'm just warning you. Okay, so you have to be really steady. And that was really overexposed. Do that again. It was reading off of off the meter reading off of those rocks back there, which are very, very bright. So I'm going to shift myself a little bit. Still a little off. And this is where you're going to have to adjust. You're going to have to figure out, you're going to take the picture, you're going to go, oh no, that's a little too dark or that's a little too bright, and then you just need to move either your aperture or your shutter speed in order to compensate for it. But in this particular case, we're starting with, we want you to stay at a certain aperture. So I'm staying at f16. Okay, that's actually good. So I'm at f16, I'm at 1/13 of a second. Then I want you to move down to f11. So these are in stops and they correspond to each other. So you could just say, okay, I'm going to move my aperture. Shutter speed. Move my aperture 1, 2, 3, because I'm in 1/3 of a stop. And what I'm asking you to do is do this in full stops. So I have 3 clicks between my full stops. Now you need to move your shutter speed the opposite way. So you just let in more light with your aperture by opening it up from f16 to f11. You're going to need to let in less light with your shutter. So I'm going to close that up. I'm going to make the time shorter. I'm at 1/13. I'm going to 1/25. Take that again. And you should find, as you're going through this, that these images are fairly similar. Because what we're doing is we're trying to find equivalent exposures, but you're also looking at to see what is happening to the background of your image. So now I wanted you to go to f8. So that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now I'm at 1/50th. And then f5.6. wrong way. 3. Now I'm at 1/100th of a second. And then I think I have F4. And now I'm at 1/200th of a second. So as I'm letting in more light with the aperture, I'm letting in less light with the shutter. You're basically going to do the backwards. You're going to do that backwards when you do shutter speed. So I think I have you starting at 1/250, and I apologize because I did not write down the correction on my sheet of paper. So I had you starting at 1/250th of a second, which is a little bit faster, faster speed than what we just ended with. So I'm going to have to adjust my aperture to deal with that. If I was going to do this particular thing again in shutter priority, but I'm not, because we're going to do something else. We wanted to take a moving subject. The shutter priority section of this is so that you can see what movement does in your image when you have faster and slower shutter speeds. And we're going to pause for a second.